Greetings! The insanity continues. Just this time, I am not on my own again. You read the title of the video. Anyone can now play Arvale Short Tales on their standard computer. The link is in the description. Finally, after 20 years, I no longer have to be the sole damn player of this game on planet Earth. Also, I can finally prove to people that it's real! Do you know how often people thought I was messing with them when I tell them about Arvale Short Tales? Okay, so there's this ancient and quite silly but very beautiful RPG from 2006, where the full version was made for these super old and forgotten consoles called Pocket PCs, where I seem to be the only one with a working copy of. There's basically no information on this game on the internet whatsoever, but what's really interesting is how this game hides a secret storyline and playable character, spoilers by the way, which you can only unlock through bringing body parts to a creepy ritual site by completing optional side quests with the other playable characters who have no idea themselves what compels them to do any of this. Once you do that, congrats! You are playing as Beylord the vampire now. The day and night cycle comes to a halt and you are locked into a perpetual night as the fifth and final playable character explodes out of its coffin, points for style I guess, and proceeds to devour almost all the other NPCs I spent 27 plus hours getting to know, which had all their own intricate stories by the way. But when I get you, and to add insult to injury, the vampire destroys the whole town without a lick of remorse afterwards. And after it had its fill, you go inside its creepy manor that is littered with the skeletons of its past victims, with the final boss being a tragic confrontation of the protagonist from the previous game, the great John DeMenchev, and who ultimately dooms himself and the town of Myastil because DeMenchev can't bring himself to kill his, and I quote, old friend. Teasing some grand adventures and a devoted friendship that you never get to see between these two, just like in Arvale 2 Ocean of Time. Oh, but by the way, before you even make it to the creepy manor, its own soul is literally a secret boss that haunts the area surrounding the manor and comes back over and over and over again, no matter how often you defeat him, and he's the most powerful boss in Arvale Short Tales on top of that. We don't talk about Lager. Not even DeMenchev can compare. Now, think about the huge implication this ghost carries, because if that is Beylord's soul, then who, or rather what, are we even playing as? Is that really Beylord? Or is that just an empty husk? A reanimated body of a friend long dead? And DeMenchev doesn't know. And then people look at me and ask, is that real? Yes! It's real. It's not a creepypasta, it's not an unfiction project, it's not an RNG, it's all real. But I couldn't show you, until now. Do you know how much easier this would have made my little Beylord documentary? I literally sat down, played through the entire tale again, noted down every single piece of text from dialogue to item descriptions, including describing the environments, and taking pictures of the levels with my phone, which I had to do in complete darkness so the sunlight wouldn't reflect on the damn screen. Hell, I even recreated the fight between DeMenchev and Beylord using the in-game assets. Cause yes, I did have access to the files, I just couldn't run the game because it was made for Pocket PCs. Not to mention, when I wanted accurate reference material of the environments for certain creative Arvale projects, I had to walk my player character around the giant levels and take many photos of them in different spots so I could compile them into one huge overview. Look at the size of this PNG file! You think Jaybot7 would have ever guessed that any of the levels he designed would be recreated in 3D one day, or even any of his characters? Or that there would be any artist documenting making fan art from sketches to highly rendered comics to straight up over 3 minutes of fully inked, colored, and shaded 2D animation of his world. No, the guy never got any fan art ever prior to me, unless you count that tiny shield made for Slug into his video as an Easter egg. Great video by the way, please do check it out. What's up with Jaybot7 anyway? He had an account on every platform under the sun, 3 blogs, and then just vanished early 2020. Like, man, I want to show you my homage to your work, but like, how? It's been over 2 years! Anyway, let me stress that this was no easy task. Just a few days before I uploaded The Outsider, I got a message. It was from Tumblr user Alien Moths. They were curious about the animation and what this whole Arvale thing was about, so I indulged them. After a very thorough and deranged explanation later, and me lamenting how Arvale Short Tales could only be played on a physical pocket PC, with me having no luck finding a working emulator whatsoever, they told me. On the very next day, they sent me this! To put it simply, I fucking lost it. They found a working emulator. Kinda. You knew it wasn't going to be this simple. When I booted up the game, I was met with this. And here is what it is supposed to look like. This was a game-breaking bug. Arvale Short Tales functions differently from the previous Arvale games. In the previous games, you buy weapons, armor, and healing items that have a limited amount of uses, so once they're used up, you buy new and better ones. In Arvale Short Tales, you start with 1 piece of armor, 1 weapon, and 1 healing vial, which never get used up and get upgraded over time. And as you can see, they are missing. The missing healing vial is especially critical, because without it, you can't heal on your own. I was able to camp next to a healing spring, which let me refill my HP again after every battle. It took half an hour, but after running back and forth I was able to grind enough money to buy the upgraded version of my missing vial. So I guess it's not game breaking after all, just really unpleasant and tedious, no? Wrong! This bug would make Beylord unplayable because it already starts with a fully upgraded vial, a flagon, you can't upgrade. And if the flagon is missing... There were also other bugs where the music wasn't playing or the player character's battle animations weren't being displayed. You probably didn't catch this, but if you compare the emulator versus my physical pocket PC, you can see that the HP is bugged too. Instead of using a slash like in my physical version, it's using a colon. I pointed out that this is how HP is displayed in the previous games, and after digging through the code, what was readable in Notepad anyways, we found a lot of remnant or unused code of Arvale 2 Ocean of Time, as well as like a tiny little bit of Arvale 1 Chain Evolution. Moth also found unused code where Beylord's fangs were its original weapon instead of its claws. I can see why that got scratched. That would have been rather awkward for Lanka and Beylord to put spells on or upgrade it. After some digging on my part, I discovered that the old UI design for Arvale Short Tales looked like this. That's Arvale 2 Ocean of Time. Mostly. That's DeMenchev right there, and the title screen, that looks like the one for Arvale Short Tales. UI design in Arvale 2 Ocean of Time is supposed to be reminiscent of DeMenchev's journal, and here we actually see a journal. It's even got the golden edges DeMenchev's journal has in Melonchi Minecarts. What's also interesting is how the UI presented here is the Pocket PC UI of Arvale 2 Ocean of Time, including its earliest releases. By the way, here's another work-in-progress screenshot from Jaybot7 when he was working on releasing Arvale 2 Ocean of Time for the iPhone, which I found peculiar. It reminded me how the Beylord spirit, which is a mirrored and inverted sprite of Beylord, is called Bay Ghost in the Arvale Short Tales files. Except, I don't think it's an inverted sprite of the vampire you are playing as. Greetings again, this is mid-editing Lewis speaking. I assumed it was an inverted sprite of the vampire because, well, look at it. That's very obviously inverted. You can even clearly make out how the shadow and light is flipped. So to prove my point, I recorded myself taking the sprite of the vampire and inverting it, which you just saw a few seconds ago. But as you can see, the colors are off. So I tried it again with a negative filter. Same thing. Huh, maybe they used a different filter? I tried reverse engineering it. I took the sprite of the spirit, inverted it, and... he looks very human. Flesh-colored skin look and all. Even sporting a long brown coat, like his old friend. At first I was ecstatic about my discovery, because is that what he looked like when he was still human-ish? But then I got a little sad because that's so far off from my own design. So of course I showed Marv, convinced in my crazy conclusion, who proceeded to snap me back into reality by pointing out that, yeah, the spirit isn't a perfect inversion. The perfect inversion is blonde, bright, and looks frankly bizarre. It gets the point across as a negative ghostly image, but it looks really silly. It's likely they started out with the inverted image and edited after to make it fit better, giving him the reds and blues back, but keeping the pale, ghostly look. Actual tinfoil hat ass behavior. Here's an image of Jaybot7 using the beginner Arvale 1 Journey of Illusion quest as a placeholder to show off the UI for the iPhone. And some of these other questlines, with the exception of the Travel to Yggdrasil's one, remind me vaguely of Arvale Short Tales quests. Like, Get the Key reminds me of Tabby's, where you need a key to break into one of the houses in Maesdale at night to steal something. Letter Delivery reminds me of Wario. Wario, among the other Arvale Short Tales player characters, like Coden, has to play mailman, basically. Find the Missing Girl. That reminds me of Lotus. There's one NPC where his little sister runs off into the Thanos Plains outside of Maesdale, and you have to get her back. Collect Flowers also vaguely reminds me of Tabby's, where he needs to get his hands on a Sable Rose to unlock invisibility. Destroy the Orcs also reminds me of Tabby's. He has to go on an orc, or rather goblin killing spree on Thanos Plains. It's actually one of the very first quests. There is also the one and only scratched soundtrack from Arvale to Ocean of Time, which is called by Castle? Bugged Castle? Beargut Castle? My best guess is that it's Beylord Castle. At least that's what the place was called in Arvale 1 Journey of Illusion before it got renamed to Beylord Manor in Arvale Short Tales, and it's connected to Kaita, where it is. Cannot be visited in Arvale 2 Ocean of Time though. Jaybot7 handwriting is not easily readable here, but like my best guess it's Beylord Castle, because a lot of the other names for the other soundtracks are the exact same names as the either what the track is called or the actual name of the level. Beylord Castle was what the place was called prior to Short Tales, so yeah. Anyway, instead you meet Beylord in Arvale 2 Ocean of Time in the Davidian Temple, which is actually just a Mazuan temple, which Davidian just built his castle on top of, I'm pretty sure. And speaking of Davidian, he got cut from the game as well. He even had his own custom overworld sprite. And Beylord in Ocean of Time was working on the Davidian, so a connection can be made. Okay, so I might be reaching a bit, and I don't exactly have a good track record of being normal about Arvale. But could it be that Arvale 2 Ocean of Time and Arvale Short Tales started out as one game? Or at least were planned to be one game originally, and then later on got split into two? Is that why we have so much unused Arvale 2 Ocean of Time code? Is that why we have such a lore load-bearing vampire, as Muff put it, even though Beylord plays such a small role in Arvale 2 Ocean of Time? They even included a downloadable wallpaper version of the dialogue sprite among the other major Arvale 2 characters, as if Beylord is somehow super significant to the plot. Like, Beylord's not, but still got included. Despite feeling so important, Beylord has such little screen time, even in Arvale Short Tales. I guess the vampire was meant for more, originally. No, of course, it's entirely possible that I'm putting shit out of my ass here and making connections where there are none. They probably just finished making Arvale 2 Ocean of Time first and then used it as a base to build Short Tales on top of that, which is why there's so much unused Arvale 2 code. It's just weird, you know? When you play through these games and encounter Beylord, you really do feel like there's supposed to be more, that it's foreshadowing something in the future, like a Chekhov's gun. Except it never gets fired. Okay, so we have a bunch of unused Arvale 2 Ocean of Time code, inventory code, that the emulator seems to be reading instead of the Arvale Short Tales code. So we just get rid of the Arvale 2 Ocean of Time code. Easier said than done. 1. The game refuses to accept any edits to the code. 2. Even after managing to edit the code anyway, the emulator refused to read it. That's because the game was packed in .cap cabinet files. After yet another long search, Morph managed to find a program built to take apart caps properly. But there was another issue, because of course, there were a bunch of files with sad remnant code that couldn't be properly opened in the notepad and edited, and sometimes they were completely incomprehensible. I mean, just look at this! So we need to find the software, in other words, the game engine that could open these files proper, such as ITM, MON, NPC, RGN, TRG, and then there's .rpg. RPG is an RPG Maker format. There are sprites split into hair, face, nose, etc. RPG Maker typically does this, but it might not be exclusive to it. The wall sprites come in batches, which is also reminiscent of the way RPG Maker groups its sprites. So, it's gotta be RPG Maker. Nope! It was developed with a C++ engine called Razor, made for Palm devices, built in PDA Mill, released in 2002. But there's another problem. It's not even the whole game engine. You need another program to even operate this thing. This entire thing forced Morph to do bullshit like setting up a virtual machine to emulate all the Windows operating systems so they could set up their .cap editor and tinker with multiple different Pocket PC emulator versions. In the end, it was a wild goose chase. Morph has been cycling through different Pocket PC emulators and trying to run different versions of Arvale Short Tales on them in the meantime, which also took lots of finding first. And then one day, one of them just worked. It was a much older version of Arvale Short Tales as well. You'd expect the newer ones to be less buggy, but no, we still don't know why. Melonchi Minecarts is playable on this emulator as well. Other programs, cap files, can be added by dropping the file into the SD file and downloading them in your emulator. The cap for Melonchi Minecarts is also gonna be linked in the description. Sadly, the audio for Melonchi Minecarts is completely busted. A great shame, because the tracks are remixes of the soundtracks from the previous titles, and I do recall Jaybot7 being quite proud of them as well. Anyway, Morph is still working on it, as well as the other games, except Arvale Treasure of Memories, of course. Sadly, their audios are also busted, but once that is fixed, they will release all Arvale games, minus Treasure of Memories, packaged with one emulator. While Jaybot7 released Arvale 1 and 2 for desktop on his own blog already, their windows are extremely small. The emulator allows for bigger screens and would allow them to be more pleasantly playable. In other words, stay tuned. Thanks for sticking around. If you want to mingle, there's the Arvale Reddit. Don't be scared to post about Arvale on there, no matter the quality. I'll try to answer any questions and comment on the stuff you post. Same goes for my Arvale Tumblr blog. My ask box is always open. You could browse through it if you want to look at more Arvale stuff. I'm mostly active on there, so feel free to reach out if you want to talk Arvale. See you soon.